Howdy, y'all. Welcome back, or welcome to the Horror Diner. It's still bad here. Will the Elder Gods ever let us return home? Who knows? Does it look like it's just getting worse there? Yes, but don't look at it too long. You don't want it to know you've seen it. Now, I see some returning customers, and that's delightful. We love customer loyalty. Welcome back. We've kept your booth just the way you like it. But it looks like there's more than a few people who this is their first trip to the Horror Diner. We're glad you're here. Let me tell you a little bit about our fine establishment. I'm Spooky Pie, your waitress, your chef, and your new friend who's going to sit down and talk about horror with you. Here at the Horror Diner, we talk about any kind of horror media you could think of. Books, movies, podcasts, video games, TV shows, other things. But basically, if it's horror, then it's fair game. Everything is on the menu. But that's not all. Every episode, we also cook up a little something that goes with the piece of media we're talking about. Sometimes that's easier than others, and other times a work won't mention food and we'll have to get creative on what our themed eat is. But we're nothing if not adaptable here, which is good, as it has allowed us to thus far evade the horrors with our lives. I think. This might be purgatory. Anyway, it's summer, which I hate. But it's June, and you know what that means?
You boy! What day is it? It's Pride, bitch!
And as such, with it being the start of summer as well as Pride Month, although it's likely only barely going to still be Pride Month when this drops, but such is life, I knew it was time to sit down and talk about one of the best horror anime/mangas I have ever come across, The Summer Hikaru Died. A few years ago, I stumbled across the series and thought the manga was absolutely enchanting, and then was a little cautious when the anime was released because things don't always go well, but at least in this case what we got was a thoughtful and actually pretty surprisingly faithful adaptation of the text. So basically, it's perfect for the time of year that my reverse seasonal depressive disorder kicks in. The temperature hits a certain point, and it becomes impossible to be happy. I don't know what to tell you. So I figured, why not lean into the skid a little bit? Summer is already so depressing. Why don't we kick it off with a melancholy gay horror anime? Plus, you know, maybe the people would want a video essay on this from a queer person who writes their own scripts and cites their sources.
James!
But before we dig into the summer sads, let's pop around to the kitchen and get you something to eat. The Summer Hikaru Died was a bit of a tricky one food-wise. Popsicles come up a lot, but I didn't really want to make popsicles. And then I thought about how one of the coolest visuals the series has is the miasma inside Hikaru, so I decided to make marbled cupcakes to show that off. Well, would you look at that, we're still in our kitchen powered by the talking heads, but what are you gonna do, I guess? Anyway, let's get into it. You will need 1 2/3 cup all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1/2 cup butter, melted, but we're not showing that here. Join the melted butter tier on Patreon if that's what you're into. 1 cup sugar, 1 large egg, 1/4 cup full-fat yogurt or sour cream, 3/4 cup whole milk or cream plus an additional tablespoon, and 1.5 tablespoons black cocoa, which we'll be using instead of black food dye because I hate the way black food dye tastes. Oh, and food coloring. You're gonna need that. First, go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Then, in a mixing bowl, whisk together your flour, baking powder, salt, and baking soda. Do you have to use a knife? No. It's kind of funny too, though. Next, get your stand mixer or hand mixer ready, and beat together the butter, sugar, egg, yogurt or sour cream, vanilla, and your whole milk or cream. Beat those together at medium to high speed until the mixture is completely smooth. Then reduce the mixer speed to low and slowly add in the dry ingredients until they are just combined. Next, fold the batter gently by hand with a spatula until any large lumps of flour are all incorporated. Remove 1/2 cup of this batter and add it to a small bowl. In this same small bowl, add the cocoa powder and the milk or cream and stir until combined. Divide the remaining vanilla batter into 3 bowls and add food dye until each is the color you want. I'm using gel dye here because it doesn't add extra liquid and it has a stronger pigmentation, in my opinion, but that's up to you. The goal here was to emulate the colors of miasma, hence black, red, blue, and white. Next, line a muffin tin with cupcake liners. Then go ahead and start adding the colored batter to each liner in equal amounts. For my estimate, it was about half a tablespoon of each color for each liner. Once you've added the batter to all liners, you're going to want to gently swirl the colors, not mix. Ideally, you'd do this with a toothpick. I didn't have a toothpick, but what I did have was a knife. It's a little more difficult this way, but it does get the job done. Once you've done this to all of them, go ahead and pop them in the oven for about 15 to 17 minutes. Keeping in mind, all ovens are different, so really, just bake until a toothpick inserted into one of them comes out mostly clean. Once they're done baking, you'll want to let them completely cool before you pipe the frosting onto them. Costume change! It was, after midnight when I finished baking the cupcakes, so I had to come back to them in the morning. So let's make the frosting! For the black cocoa chocolate frosting, you will need 4 cups of powdered sugar, 3/4 cups black cocoa powder, 1/3 to 1/2 cup either milk or cream, 1/8 teaspoon salt, 2.5 teaspoons vanilla extract, and 1 cup unsalted butter at room temperature, not melted. In a clean mixing bowl, add the powdered sugar, cocoa, and salt. Whisk them together until combined. In a separate large bowl, beat the softened butter on medium to high speed until it's smooth. Reduce the mixer's speed and slowly add the dry ingredients in. You may need to pause every so often to scrape down the bowl. Add the vanilla extract and continue mixing until smooth. Slowly add in your milk or cream until the frosting is the consistency you want, and then beat again on medium-high speed until everything is totally incorporated. Go get your cupcakes and fill a pastry bag with your frosting, and go ahead and pipe some cute swirls on those guys. Look how cute they are! Let's give them a second to set up and head over to my office. Okay, welcome back to the thing. I don't really have any good sister location jokes anymore. I didn't think I'd have to milk that for as long as I've had to. Oh god, I don't know. Whoa, is that circus, baby? Let's wake up fun time, Foxy. I have no idea anymore, you guys. I miss my office. You aren't here for that, though. Or maybe you are. I don't know your life. But, right, the Summer Hikaru Died. The Summer Hikaru Died is a rich and layered story that I absolutely adore. It has a lot to say about coming of age, as well as identity, sexuality, and agency. Anyone who grew up a queer teenager knows the very specific and unique hell of that particular time of self-discovery. In general, figuring out and coming to terms with your sexuality at a young age is rarely a smooth process, and, generally speaking, this is only exacerbated by coming of age queer in a rural community or small town. In a small insular community where everyone knows everyone's business, and compulsory heterosexuality is often the status quo, there are few things more isolating or lonely than knowing you're different than what is considered normal or acceptable in your hometown. This comes with an almost stifling sense of shame. So, when every day of your life feels like you're being crushed under the suffocating need to be anything but yourself, what more could you hope for than someone who would not only see, but accept you, even if what sees and accepts you is a monster? As stated by Amanda Hudgins in her article for Unwinnable, what happens when you look into the void, and the void doesn't just look back, but loves you? This is precisely the question posed by The Summer Hikaru Died. Monstrosity and its relation to queer otherness is at the heart of a sensitive, coming-of-age love story that, monsters aside, is truly about two lost, broken people finding each other in a world that doesn't want them together. But before we can dig into the meat of that story and all it means and entails, we need to get into the plot. I will obviously be leaving some things out, because we're going to be here all day if I don't. There are subplots and side characters that, while I find them interesting and could definitely talk about, are not the focus of this essay, which is Hikaru and Yoshiki, their relationship, and what directly affects them. I want to get that out of the way before I get comments on, why don't you talk about this subplot with XYZ character?
I found a sandwich in one of your parks, and I want to know why it didn't have mayonnaise.
Plus, that gives you things to discover if you decide to read or watch it, which you should, it's amazing. That being said, we're going to be entering spoiler territory. As with the other anime I've covered, I will be discussing both the anime and the manga, so if you do not want to be spoiled or just want to go straight to the analysis portion, as always, please skip to the clearly marked timestamp below. But if neither scenario above applies to you and you're still here, well, let's get into it. We open on two boys, Yoshiki and the titular Hikaru. It's summer, as the title would imply, and they're ducking into a convenience store to get popsicles. With said popsicles acquired, they sit outside the store making small talk about school and what teachers are toughest, etc. As they talk, Yoshiki asks Hikaru if he really doesn't remember anything at all from the time that he went missing. Despite the seriousness of a conversation about a teenager having gone missing, the conversation is fairly light and playful, until Yoshiki tells Hikaru that he needs to ask him something strange. "You're not the real Hikaru, are you?" And with that, Hikaru, or at least who we've been told is Hikaru, starts to change. The side of his face morphs into a sort of miasma. As he begins to look less and less human, who, or whatever this is, clings to Yoshiki and begs him not to tell anyone, saying it's the first time he's gotten to be human and go to school and make friends, telling Yoshiki that he cares deeply for him and doesn't want to have to kill him. And Yoshiki in that moment thinks how the real Hikaru is gone, and even if this Hikaru isn't real, he still wants to be with him. So Yoshiki agrees, playing pretend is better than a world in which no version of Hikaru exists. We see some time passing, and Yoshiki keeps to his word of acting like this Hikaru is the only Hikaru, which technically he is now. But he also learns that while this Hikaru shares his Hikaru's memories at a basic level, the experience of familiar things are still new. A movie the real Hikaru had seen a million times brings this Hikaru to tears. A food that should be nothing new is like a religious experience to him. Also, cats, totally terrified of him now, won't come within a country mile of Hikaru. On a day that should be like any other, when they're walking home from school, they are stopped when an old woman begins screaming and pointing at Hikaru, calling him Nonuki-sama. The boys brush it off, but it clearly had some effect on Hikaru, and as they continue home, Yoshiki finally asks the burning question, "Did you kill Hikaru?" He swears he didn't, that Hikaru was dying when he found him, but not from anything he did. And finally, Yoshiki asks, "Do you like me?" And Hikaru emphatically tells him that he does. After telling Hikaru that he better not disappear again, Yoshiki turns in for the night. Sometime later that night, we see the same old woman who had earlier been frightened of Hikaru. She's huddling in her home in terror as someone outside calls her name, saying that they have a delivery for her. She yells at the unseen speaker to leave, telling them they can't come in, to which the voice tells her that they are already inside. Ooh. An indeterminate amount of time passes, and we see Yoshiki in school as one of his classmates, Maki, begs him to accompany him on his walk home. His usual route is closed due to construction, leaving his only other option to walk through the woods. But he finds the woods terrifying, saying how you have to only keep your eyes on the path and never look out into the woods. This conversation leads to a gaggle of classmates saying that they want to go, including Hikaru, which surprises everyone, since apparently he could never handle scary stuff before. He assures them that he's better with that stuff now, and the gang plans to head out. But not before their homeroom teacher warns them that there may be a lot of police activity in the village, since a body was found this morning. With that knowledge, they set off into the woods, gossiping about this news they just learned, and how it was an old woman who apparently died strangling herself with her own hand. But the walk through the forest to Maki's place proves to be pretty uneventful. The gang gets him home safe, and then sets off back through the woods, since this was literally on the way to no one's house but Maki's. And that's when the trouble actually happens. Yoshiki does exactly what he was told not to, and looks away from the path and into the woods. A specter that is a head with long hair and an elongated neck catches him looking, and begins to head towards him. He turns to Hikaru, who is very casual about the whole thing, basically just saying, "Whoops, guess you saw that," before he more or less absorbs the creature into himself and collapses. Their two classmates don't see this happen, but hear the resulting noise and bolt, leaving Hikaru and Yoshiki alone in the woods. Hikaru explains that the entity in the woods was trying to attach itself to Yoshiki, so he took it inside him. He tells Yoshiki to make sure to not look out at anything but him until they're out, and taking him by his sleeve leads him out of the woods. Their friends are waiting for them at the end of the forest, and are concerned about the noise they heard, which Hikaru explains away as him tripping, and there being anti-animal measures likely set up in the woods. Even though she doesn't say so, their one friend Asako apparently sensed something in the woods. Moving forward in time again, here comes the part where I have to choose all my words really carefully to not make YouTube mad. Yoshiki and Hikaru find themselves in a storeroom where Hikaru has offered to show Yoshiki his insides. Hikaru opens up a tear in his chest to allow Yoshiki to put a hand in. There are very few ways to describe this scene without YouTube getting big mad, because it's not even a subtle analogy for a sex scene. In broad terms, Both of them are pretty okay with the whole thing until things start to go too far, and something Hikaru starts to pull Yoshiki in. He pulls away before it's too late, and while Hikaru is willing to brush it off as a joke, Yoshiki is visibly distressed, becoming angry when Hikaru teases him by taking his shirt off. But they seem to at least somewhat smooth over any hurt feelings. Later, Yoshiki is out picking up groceries at his sister's request when he's accosted by a middle-aged woman. She tells him that she can sense he has something dangerous near him, and that if he doesn't separate himself soon, he will find himself mixed up with it. That if he gets too involved, he won't be human anymore. She explains that she can see things most people can't, and she's been aware of an ominous presence in the mountain for ages, but recently the ominous feeling she got seemed to have disappeared until recently when she noticed it emanating from Yoshiki. She gives him her number and tells him to call her if he needs to talk. Yoshiki ignores this for a while, but after an afternoon of hanging out with new Hikaru makes him spiral about the lie they're both living, he ends up texting her that he wants to meet. He meets up with a woman named Rie at a diner, and while we do not see him do so, he apparently tells her at least something about what has gone on with him and Hikaru. She asks him if he's noticed increasingly strange things happening in and around the village, and posits that it's caused by whatever is currently wearing his friend. She also tells him that her husband came back from the dead, but it was very bad, and says that nothing good will come of him and Hikaru staying together. Sometime later, we see Yoshiki alone in a classroom after school. His classmate tells him Hikaru is looking for him, and Yoshiki says to tell him to go home without him. But Hikaru comes looking for Yoshiki, and when this becomes a fight that culminates in Yoshiki screaming at him that he isn't the real Hikaru, in despair, Hikaru tells him that he knows this but can't help liking Yoshiki all the same, and begins to unravel. And the entity, or whatever is inside Hikaru, begins to envelop Yoshiki. Hikaru manages to pull back before it's too late, but it's clear he's struggling to control something within him that wants to devour Yoshiki. He begs Yoshiki not to hate him and flees. The next day, Hikaru isn't in school, and after class, Yoshiki finds him hiding in his home, saying how Yoshiki must find him disgusting and hate him now. Hikaru apologizes, stating that all he wants is to be with Yoshiki, and even though Yoshiki understands that he's dangerous and that he's been warned, he can't help but feel affection for this being and forgives him. Alongside the narrative of Yoshiki and Hikaru, we see that behind the scenes there is a meeting of a small group of village members who are tasked with keeping malevolent forces from destroying the village. Based on the recent violent death of the old woman, this is not going particularly well. Admitting that they are in over their heads, one of them mentions that they had to call in someone. They're reluctant to work with them, but desperate times, blah blah blah. And we briefly glimpse a man with his back to us in a dark room. Presumably, this is the backup that has been called. We later see the villagers and this man discussing that occurrences that used to only be in the mountains or woods are now happening in town. They mention how Indo's son, who we know to be Hikaru, went missing and how they believe a ritual has failed. Somewhat connected to this, we see Hikaru having a get-together of classmates at his house while his mother is out of town. When he asks Yoshiki to go and retrieve a game from his room, while Yoshiki's there, he finds a dirty and torn note in Hikaru's handwriting that mentions the duty of the Indos, which he puts away in his pocket for later. Outside, the teenagers play with fireworks until their lighter runs out. Hikaru says he'll go get a new one, and Asako offers to go with him. A little after they leave, Yoshiki goes after them, wanting them to pick up ice cream too while they're at it. We see Asako and Hikaru walking alone, and the conversation is mostly casual until Asako says to him that she has an odd question. Who exactly are you? We've been given hints up to this point that she's sensitive to the paranormal, so if anyone was going to catch on, it makes sense that it's her. We've also gotten a few side bits in the manga centered on her ability to see things other people can't, but like I mentioned, touching on absolutely every single thing that happens will make this a 5-hour-long video. Anyway, frightened that Asako knows and will expose his secret, Hikaru again begins to unravel, but Yoshiki shows up before he can presumably eat her, and instead Asako is just rendered unconscious. Yoshiki is horrified at how casually Hikaru was going to kill their friend, and how he doesn't seem to see why this would be an issue. This is of course when Yoshiki puts together that Hikaru is the one who killed the old woman. It's okay, he's doing his best. And Asako starts to come to amidst his freak out about that. The second she's awake again, her first concern is to ask Hikaru if he's alright because she can tell that he's been possessed by what she calls a ghost. She explains that she's noticed for a while, and even though Yoshiki assures her that he believes her, she thinks she must sound insane to them and says she'll head back to the house ahead of them, leaving Yoshiki and Hikaru alone. But Yoshiki is still reasonably upset about having almost witnessed the murder of his friend, and heads back to his own home instead. This leaves Hikaru to ponder the meaning of being alive and human while his friends are sleeping around him in his home. Due to the way things went, when time to go to school rolls around again, he doesn't expect Yoshiki to be there to walk to school with him. But, as he always does, Yoshiki shows up and says that they should blow off school for the day. Yoshiki acts like nothing has happened and spends the day being almost uncharacteristically nice to Hikaru. He takes him to a movie, buys him snacks, and invites him back to his place to read manga with him, saying his mother and sister are gone for the day. And it is in the middle of this peaceful scene of the two boys reading manga in Yoshiki's bedroom that Yoshiki stabs Hikaru. Not being human, this doesn't kill Hikaru, and Yoshiki spirals, saying he should have known it wouldn't and how he tried to give him one last nice day. Yoshiki then saying since he is unable to kill Hikaru, that he wants Hikaru to kill him instead. Hikaru, of course, does not do this. But what he does do is reach within himself and pull out some of what is inside of him, solidifying it into a small object that he hands to Yoshiki, saying that it's half of his insides and that would make him able to be killed by a human. When Yoshiki asks him why he would go so far, Hikaru tells him the one place he has felt he belongs is with Yoshiki, and Yoshiki vows eternally to stick with Hikaru until the end. Outwardly telling them if he tends to stay around here, they should figure out what he is. And the boys set to work cleaning up the almost murder scene before Yoshiki's mom can come home and witness it. So they then do the best thing you can do in a horror franchise and go to the library, where there's a helpful librarian who is also, uncomfortably, the daughter of the old woman Hikaru killed, but she's able to put them onto some maps and documents that detail how the village used to be part of a larger village before it was split into smaller villages resembling a human body. Before this, there had been a great catastrophe, and from it, a malevolent god had been born, and a ritual is now performed to keep the malevolent god from coming down the mountain. They figure out that this must have had to do with why the human Hikaru was in the forest, and that the ritual failed, which is how this Hikaru is here now. Hikaru himself isn't sure that's exactly what happened, but he's unable to recall. The next day they're in class when Yoshiki glances a figure out the window, which he initially believes to be a phantom. But Hikaru tells him that it's a person. The person is tackled, but not before he stabs the teacher and cuts his own neck. Asako identifies this as someone with something in them, and then asks Hikaru how he's doing since she'd also identified him as that, but he brushes it off, saying he's fine, he has a high tolerance for this sort of thing. After school, Yoshiki and Hikaru find themselves in a diner when it suddenly becomes quiet and deserted, except for a sound like a bell. A phantom starts to emerge from under their table. Hikaru tells Yoshiki not to look at it and tries to absorb it like he has the other creatures that have threatened Yoshiki, but this time, it doesn't work. The boys attempt to flee the creature, but find themselves locked in the diner with it, but Rie appears and drives it away. She takes the boys back to her home, and while Hikaru rests on her couch, the attempt to get rid of the phantom clearly having taken a toll on him, she and Yoshiki talk. She seems only mildly disappointed that Yoshiki hasn't taken her warning seriously about staying away from Hikaru, and more or less says, oh well, boys will be boys. She tells him that the thing in the diner, referred to, at least in the translation when I first started reading the manga, is an impurity. She goes on to tell Yoshiki how the veil between this world and the spirit world is very thin, and sometimes a dead person's strong feelings can surpass it and cause them to be reborn as something new, and distortions can cause holes in the veil for these phantoms to pass through. She says Hikaru attracts impurities, and when he was in the mountains, it kept them all up there as well, but since he's down here in the village now, they too are coming here. She also points out that the more impurities that infiltrate the village, the more people are going to die, so they're going to have to figure out what they want to do. Hikaru wants to protect this place that is the only place he's ever felt welcome, and Yoshiki has vowed to follow Hikaru, so Rie tells them they'll figure it out together and sends them on their way. But not before stopping Hikaru to tell him that if him and Yoshiki continue to mix, Yoshiki won't be able to return to the human world. Put on another research trail by Rie, the boys question one of the village elders that says that everything that is happening is the fault of the Indo family, Hikaru's family, and that a great taboo was committed by that family and many people died because of it, and that the Indo men going to the mountain, like Hikaru and his father before him, is a ritual to apologize for this discretion. Becoming increasingly agitated, the old man yells at Hikaru that he should know this and tells him to go look in his family shrine, which is when Hikaru realizes that the old man has an entity inside of him. The old man then transforms and comes at them with a katana, but is stopped by Tanaka, the hunter who was summoned by the village council to deal with the anomalies. He disarms the old man and immediately beheads Hikaru. The entity, or whatever cosmic thing is inside Hikaru, begins to violently spill out through the wound in his neck, while Yoshiki, who is absolutely horrified, retrieves Hikaru's head and tries to reattach it. He eventually does manage to do this, but is so overwhelmed by this god-awful experience that he passes out. Yoshiki later wakes up in a hospital with Hikaru the next bed over, apparently having survived. Tanaka is nowhere to be seen. He's back to doing his own thing again. Before anyone comes to the comments about how little I'm talking about Tanaka, there is a lot of ground to cover here. Tanaka has so much going on, I could do a video just on him. And my focus of the video is what directly impacts Yoshiki and Hikaru. And hey, if you want to know more about him, all the more reason to read the manga or watch the anime. Moving on. Welcome back, Noah. Rie comes to visit the hospital, and it takes Hikaru much longer to wake up than it did for Yoshiki. When he does, she determines that he seems diminished or weaker somehow. This is obviously a result of him giving the piece of himself to Yoshiki. This also seems to be why it was so easy for Tanaka to behead him, why it took so long for him to heal from that, and why he can feel pain now when he never used to be able to. And it seems like things are more or less back to normal, but Hikaru feels off after this incident, and a few days later after school, the miasma begins to come out from the seam in his neck in full force. It fully envelops Yoshiki, who at first panics, and then is surprised by how much he isn't bothered by this. Luckily, Hikaru is once again able to pull it back before any irreparable damage is done to Yoshiki, but as the scene moves away from the two boys, we can see that this incident was witnessed by Asuko. We then cut to the evening of presumably the next day, and the boys are in front of the Endo family temple, having waited until Hikaru's grandfather went to sleep to investigate. Upon opening the temple, they find the walls covered in wooden carvings of human faces from floor to ceiling. This causes Hikaru to experience a memory that the real Hikaru had of this place. Throughout the village's history, human heads have been offered up to the deity known as Anuki in return for granting wishes like for a good harvest or for the end of a plague. Because these heads would be taken by the deity, wooden ones were carved of the dead people for their memorial in the temple. The Endo family has been charged with keeping this temple for generations, and while it is revealed that some people who are nearing the end of their lives offer to be beheaded willingly for this cause, many of the heads in here are murder victims. Hikaru snaps back into reality just as the memory of Hikaru's father is saying to remember the Endo family's sin. Hikaru is puzzled, saying how he was always an entity who was supposed to grant wishes, but he never required human heads be offered up to him, so why has this been going on so long? Yoshiki is, understandably, disturbed to learn the dark secret of his village, and because of this, he realizes he has to go to talk to the last person who might know about it. His father, who we have seen almost nothing of or know almost anything about until this point. It's obvious that this is a very strained relationship, but Yoshiki does manage to ask his father about the Endo family's sin. His father tells him how every 5 years, the Endo men must make a trip up to the mountain to apologize and make sure that the gods stay in their place. Yoshiki asks what they have to apologize for, and his father says the story he'd heard from Hikaru's father when they were younger was that a long time ago, the patriarch of the Endo family's wife had died in the plague. So he went into the mountains and promised the deity he would bring them all the heads that they wanted that were outside the Endo family, as long as his wife was brought back to life. That same day, a third of the village's population died, all from mysterious circumstances, but all in ways that left them decapitated. In return, the wife was brought back, but only her head, and since she was only a living human head, she died again very shortly, and the bizarre deaths also stopped when she did. The head of the wife has stayed in the family, though, referred to as Indohichi, and that the men of the family time and time again bring the head up the mountain, but it always returns to the Indos. Hikaru's father had wanted to put an end to the ritual, but he was killed in an accident before he could. We move forward in time a bit, and it's summer break and the boys decide to go to the beach. Hikaru tells Yoshiki that he recently remembered that when he'd found the real Hikaru dying in the woods, that he'd made a wish that he didn't want anyone to be sad, especially Yoshiki, and this Hikaru worries he won't be able to grant that. He plans to go up to the mountain to see if it will stop the impurities, and tells Yoshiki it will be good for him if he does. Yoshiki can finally properly mourn Hikaru and be able to move on with his life. He tells Yoshiki that while he may have just been a substitute for Hikaru, what Yoshiki has done for him has meant everything. He then tells Yoshiki that he loves him. Yoshiki breaks down, insisting that he hasn't been a substitute, and he's been thinking of him as his own person and not as the old Hikaru for a while now. And in the middle of this beautiful, touching, heartfelt scene, Tanaka shows up because apparently he's been tracking Yoshiki and has no ability to read a goddamn room. And while I came to love Tanaka, I will admit that I screamed in frustration when I got to this part in the manga. And a major plus I will give to the anime at this point is that the anime lets the scene between Hikaru and Yoshiki fully run its course and have room to breathe before Tanaka enters the picture. This conversation between the boys is in fact where the current season of the anime ends, meaning we're strictly talking about the manga from here on out. But anyway, Tanaka takes the time, since he's already ruined the moment, to tell Hikaru that going back up the mountain won't do any good. He tells him that just as he is a substitute for Hikaru Indo, he is also a substitute for Nonuki-sama. He says Hikaru is something else entirely, some sort of abnormal, unkillable being. But he also says that he comes in peace and just wants to talk to them. He asks them what they know about the Indo family curse, and Yoshiki answers that it was brought about by the patriarch wishing for his wife to come back to life. Tanaka says that this is likely when Hikaru was brought into this world. He tells them that there are beings that are like lost children who slide from the other side into our world and grant a wish as they do so. The people who contact these entities rarely understand what they're talking to and make a wish, causing the entity to bend in answer to that wish. Wishes granted by these entities usually end in misfortune though, and to make a contract with one is to invite tragedy. This is the case with Hikaru and Nonuki-sama. The Indo-patriarch had managed to make contact with the entity that is now Hikaru, causing the broken wish and the following calamity. And while he wasn't actually Nonuki-sama, he was bent into the shape of what the villagers thought that meant, and had managed to keep all the abnormalities in the mountain until now. Hikaru is puzzled and asks him why going back to the mountain wouldn't do anything then, and Tanaka tells him it's because he's changed. He's become weak and would no longer be able to absorb all the impurities around him, kind of like what happened in the diner. So while Tanaka says that Hikaru is not the entity that has been accepting all the heads over the years, something has been. There was a local folktale about a man who looked into a hole and it beheaded him, but his village was provided with an abundance of food in return for his unknowing sacrifice. While the legitimacy of this myth is questionable, Tanaka believes the hole does exist, and with Hikaru no longer on the mountain, it is spreading unchecked. Tanaka says since Hikaru was going to destroy himself anyway, why not help him close the hole? Yoshiki objects, obviously, and Tanaka, having the most tact of anyone ever, first accuses Yoshiki of just hanging on to the memory of Hikaru because this thing he's hanging out with is just his corpse. And when Yoshiki refutes that, saying that this Hikaru has his own thoughts and personality and it is him he wants to be around, Tanaka is dismissive, saying something to the effect of, well, that guy is just a stranger then, what's the point? After this whole mess, the boys find themselves on a train home. Yoshiki is introspective, telling Hikaru he's been selfish, and while he's been saying everything he does is for the village or for Hikaru, it's really been for himself. To which Hikaru replies that's all he's ever done too, and even if that is the case, Yoshiki has been nothing but good to him. Yoshiki tells Hikaru all he wants to do is run away with him to somewhere far away, but he knows something bad will happen to the village if they do, and this is where his family lives. So he begrudgingly says he thinks they do need to team up with Tanaka to close the hole. But he says when all this is over, they can go wherever Hikaru wants to go, which turns out to be a bakery in Tokyo, which is kind of cute. But this is also when they get a phone call from Rie telling them to look out the night sky where they see a giant trail of light has formed. Rie picks them up from the train station and they relay everything they learned that day. Rie amends Tanaka's story, saying she believes there to be a series of holes that the impurities are coming from, but she does agree that something needs to be done or something terrible will happen. It is around this time that a neighboring village is holding a festival that used to be known as the Hole Patching. While in many ways it resembles an ordinary summer festival, the village has a tradition of creating dolls called hokos that are adorned with thread and needles that they display during the festival, and at the end take to a cave on the outskirts of the village as a sort of ritual. So the boys, along with Maki, who is a cult-obsessed brother put them onto this knowledge, set out to investigate the festival, while Rie looks into the cave on the outskirts of the village. While at the festival, the boys encounter a display made of hundreds of dolls, and Yoshiki realizes that these are a substitution for human sacrifices, kind of like the wooden heads, but they are offered in place of the villagers. The dolls were sewn and used to patch holes, though supposedly before, children were sent through the holes with needle and thread to sew it closed from the other side, essentially being sacrificed because that would absolutely be a one-way trip. But learning this also gives Yoshiki the terrible realization that while it seems like these holes, like the one Tanaka wants help with, can be closed, they can only be closed from the other side. Having seen everything at the festival, the boys head to the cave. Hikaru says that while any human who traveled to the other side to close the hole would die, he can do it because he isn't human. He's convinced that the bond between him and Yoshiki will allow Yoshiki to pull him back out. It's not a great plan, but it is a plan. So the boys set out to close the hole in the cave. Knowing that the type of creature Hikaru is one that is bound to wishes created by humans, regardless of whether or not those wishes turn out as expected, Yoshiki makes his wish that Hikaru will return from the other side. Hikaru goes through, and it is a difficult, messy ordeal that almost kills both of them. But Hikaru manages to seal the hole, and even though the forces of the other side do their utmost to keep him there, Yoshiki manages to reach through to him, but like the wish that first brought Hikaru into existence, the wish doesn't turn out 100% right. Since Yoshiki's soul is under protection, Hikaru has to tether his essence to the nearest human soul in order to return to his body, which, unfortunately, happens to be a little girl who came to offer her doll to the cave. The little girl does live through the ordeal, but it does put her in the hospital. Yoshiki himself similarly comes to in a hospital waiting room with Rie present. He's covered in strange marks and really beat up from his contact with the other side and the entity inside Hikaru. She tells him that with him and Hikaru having sealed the hole, only 2 remain in the region, but she also tells him to go home and that she will finish this with Hikaru, which Yoshiki is not having. But Rie more or less snaps and tells him he needs to stop getting involved with Hikaru or soon he won't be human anymore. Rie leaves Yoshiki spiraling in the waiting room and leaves in her car with Hikaru. Asuko finds Yoshiki. I haven't touched on it, but she's been having a whole subplot where her and Tanaka closed another hole. She tells Yoshiki she knows the truth about Hikaru and everything that's going on, and that he should stop being so stubborn and not try to carry the weight of everything on his own. And Yoshiki finally admits out loud that he'd always had feelings for the human Hikaru when he was alive. He'd always been terrified to admit it because he lives in a small town where homophobia is the norm, and his elders and peers alike have openly talked about how they feel being gay is wrong. And he knows that Hikaru is not the human Hikaru, but even though he's a monster, Yoshiki feels like he's saved him and that they are each other's safe space. And Asuko is great, and tells him nothing is wrong with him because nothing is. But she definitely thinks him and Hikaru need to talk and sort this out more than they have. And since we are having a touching moment of human vulnerability, Tanaka again shows up. He's here to more or less abduct these children. Sort of. He really ends up just driving them home. But the whole way he does talk about holes and how if they're not closed, they will collapse in on themselves, taking the surrounding village with it. It's happened before, and not only was the village wiped out entirely, but the name of the village and the people within it were essentially wiped from everyone's memory like they'd never existed at all. So these are the stakes involved and why the other holes need to be closed as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Hikaru and Rie are approaching the site of the next hole, or at least that is what Rie has told Hikaru. She has unfortunately been in collaboration with the organization that Tanaka works for, and they have set a trap for him. When he enters the cave, he is dismembered with wires strung throughout it and captured by members of the organization. Yoshiki and Asuko make their way to the fake hole where Hikaru was kidnapped, finding his shattered watch in the process. They have to evade people from the organization, and Tanaka calls telling them to make their way to Rie's house since the organization will now be after Yoshiki because he has Hikaru's other half. And that's all fine and good until they realize the organization has sent a phantom after them. They manage to lure it into the woods where Hikaru first absorbed an entity and trick it into another phantom's territory. They eventually make it to Rie's apartment building, where Tanaka is waiting in a car and tells them that they're going to go get Hikaru back. While this is happening, the organization has reassembled Hikaru and plans to reveal him before the village, assuming that if he is seen for his true self, he will no longer wish to remain in the village, and they will be able to force him to come with them and bend to their will. Knowing what kind of an entity he is, the head of the organization plans to use Hikaru's obligation to grant a wish against him, and wishes for him to reveal his true self. And he does in front of practically the whole village. Yoshiki manages to arrive just as this happens, and while people are running away from the miasma, Yoshiki walks directly into it, saying he isn't afraid of Hikaru anymore and is fully absorbed into the entity. Within the miasma, Yoshiki looks for what he can recognize as Hikaru, telling him how he never felt like he belonged anywhere until he began spending time with Hikaru, rather with this Hikaru, that he says he's the only place he's felt safe, and he says ultimately he doesn't care if what they have is considered normal or acceptable. He loves Hikaru more than anything, and finally making his way to the center mass, Yoshiki embraces Hikaru. He asks him if he can make one wish, that Hikaru no longer has to grant any more wishes, and as he does so, he hands Hikaru back the piece of himself he'd given to him, and this lets Hikaru return to his human shape. The boys plan to leave the village together when the head of the organization pipes up again, not keen on losing her asset. She tells Hikaru to come with her, thinking that now that he's been exposed to the village for what he really is, he'll come willingly. But he tells her, no. Thank you. I'm good. She tries to again entrap him with the wish mechanic, saying her wish that is if he doesn't come with her now, that he will kill Yoshiki. But Hikaru doesn't have to grant wishes anymore. He's in fact bound not to by the wish that Yoshiki made. And the last shot we currently have is of Tanaka basically yelling in your face at the head of the organization, because Yoshiki's wish has thwarted the company's ability to use Hikaru, which, as of writing the script, is the most recent update, and the series is rumored to be ending soon, so maybe I should have waited until it wrapped up? Maybe. But listen, I really wanted this to be my beginning of summer and Pride Month video. And if you don't know why that is, I'm gonna guess you zoned out through the whole summary, because queerness is an intrinsic part of the Summer Hikaru Died's DNA. There are multiple angles that it approaches queerness from, of which I plan to touch on more than a few, but two of the most prominent revolve around the alienation of growing up queer in a small town, and the identification with otherness and monstrosity of that same coming of age. Monsters, impurities, phantoms, these are all tangible and physical threats within the confines of the text. And it should not be understated that these are absolutely a danger to Yoshiki. But long before Nonuki-sama came down from the mountain to fall in love with a human boy, Yoshiki was already subjected to a constant danger of a different kind. When we meet Yoshiki, he is a deeply, deeply closeted young man who views his own sexuality with shame and the kind of fear of discovery you can only have in a small community that can generously be referred to as close-minded. We see in a flashback Yoshiki has to when Hikaru was alive, where the subject of one of the villager's sons is brought up. Hikaru says he's heard the boy has some sort of terrible disease, and Yoshiki, looking a mixture of uncomfortable and sad, corrects Hikaru, saying he doesn't have a disease, he's gay. These type of microaggressions are peppered throughout the neighborhood, with everything from Yoshiki's relatives asking about girlfriends and getting married even though he's still in high school, to the alive version of Hikaru teasing Yoshiki for becoming uncomfortable and standoffish when the subject of him getting a girlfriend is brought up, to even when Rie remarks how shocked she was that Hikaru was a boy, having assumed that someone Yoshiki would be that closely entangled with would have to be female. Even Rie's insistence that Hikaru and Yoshiki's involvement with each other is wrong and will lead to destruction does more than a little echo the idea of a prejudiced view of two young men pursuing a romantic relationship. Their relationship, the fact that they have feelings for each other, is viewed as dangerous on the same level as the phantoms hurting and killing people throughout the village. And while we know this to not be the case, if you're in this sort of insular small town where heterosexuality is not just the norm but the expectation, if you're queer, then you're the other. If you're queer, then you're the monster. As stated by Maya Tran, queerness has always been seen as the other, something demonized and awful. In response to that, the queer community has leaned into the idea that we are other. From breaking gender norms to pushing boundaries, to be queer is to question society. Many monsters do the same, though that is portrayed as something evil, something to be killed and stopped. Most monsters simply attempt to exist in a way that is not compatible with society. If we look at the core of monsters, they are not inherently bad, just different. Monsters have long been a metaphor for queerness, and while queerness and monstrosity are definitely linked here, the Summer Hikaru Died does not leave the monster as a metaphor. It says the quiet parts out loud. The monster is queer. The protagonist is queer. Which is not to say it does not still play with the idea of being queer as monstrous. Yoshiki thinks of himself as the actual monster, even after he knows Hikaru has killed an old woman, tried to kill one of their classmates, hell, tried to kill him. Yoshiki insists that the true monster is him. He views his sexuality as a greater evil than a literal monster, telling Hikaru it's better if he doesn't understand his feelings when this new Hikaru wants to understand why Yoshiki is flustered seeing him with his shirt off. And while this view is far from healthy, and most definitely a form of internalized homophobia, it, in some ways, makes sense that what is wearing Hikaru is more home to him than Hikaru himself actually was. Yoshiki states he'd never thought he'd had a place in this world and that he's always had to hide who he really is. But while we see in flashbacks multiple times when the living Hikaru mocked Yoshiki for his lack of interest in girls, and found it strange how Yoshiki would be upset by the concept of him dating girls, this new Hikaru, the monster Hikaru, doesn't just accept Yoshiki, he loves Yoshiki. And to that point, Hikaru and his relationship to queerness and sexuality is a discussion all on its own, and some points of him are truly the least subtextual parts of the text. After all, it's pretty impossible to view the scenes of Hikaru and Yoshiki mixing as anything other than fumbling first attempts at sex. And even many of Hikaru's outbursts and acts of desperation feel very akin to the hell of being hopelessly in love with someone determined to stay in the closet, who is afraid of reciprocating your love on the level and intensity with which you give it.
Well, I do want you. So be brave and want me back.
But beyond the obvious, because again, The Summer Hikaru Died is the rare series that isn't afraid to express its queerness instead of bearing it in metaphor, there are layers to Hikaru, or the new Hikaru as we know him, that add an extra depth and complexity to the love story between him and Yoshiki. While there are many incredibly nuanced aspects of Hikaru as a character, some of the most revealing aspects are shown to us in a scene that could be considered largely a throwaway blink if you miss it one. It appears in only a single panel of the manga, and for a split second in the anime. When Yoshiki and Hikaru visit a library to research Nonuki-sama and to get to the root of the local legend in hopes of helping Hikaru, or at the very least figuring out what he is, Yoshiki returns to the table Hikaru has been sitting at to find that Hikaru has collected 3 different books: Frankenstein, The Little Mermaid, and Tsuru no Onogaishi, which is the Japanese iteration of the Crane Wife fairy tale. This implies that something in each of these texts speaks to Hikaru, and in looking at how he is similar to these texts, we get a greater understanding of both his queerness and how he sees himself. So the first text we need to examine in regard to this is Frankenstein, which, without even getting into the content of the story itself yet, has a firm place in queer history. The author of the original work, Mary Shelley, was revealed recently in a found letter to her friend Edward Trelawney to have been bisexual, and then the most culturally prevalent adaptation, the 1931 film, was directed by James Whale, who was an openly homosexual man. Beyond this, Frankenstein has long been seen as a story with queer themes, in no small part because it's the story of a man obsessed with creating life and essentially birthing a child without involving a woman in any step of the process. But in regards to Hikaru himself, even with the queer reading, I think there are other reasons why he might see Frankenstein's monster as an analog. The creature is a new life form, different than the sum of its parts. The creature is essentially a corpse housing a new life inside of it, much like Hikaru, or what is piloting around Hikaru's body. And for all intents and purposes, both are monsters created by man. The difference being that Frankenstein's monster was created in a lab by Victor Frankenstein, an act of hubris to play God, and this Hikaru was created and given form by human Hikaru's dying wish that Yoshiki not be left alone. And it would be remiss to not think perhaps Hikaru finds a similarity in himself and the creature's loneliness and desire to have a mate like him. In Shelley's text, the creature states, when imploring his creator to make him a mate, "Shall each man," he says, "find a wife for his bosom, and each beast have his mate, and I be alone? I had feelings of affection, and they were requited by detestation and scorn." It's hard not to see the same despair reflected when Yoshiki initially rejects Hikaru after his first meeting with Rie, telling him he isn't the real Hikaru, and Hikaru comes undone, saying he knows he isn't, but that doesn't change how he feels for Yoshiki. The other 2 texts Hikaru has chosen, while they are not associated with monsters like Frankenstein, both deal with otherness and queerness. I know I have spoken about The Little Mermaid in my video on This Monster Wants to Eat Me. Go watch it if you haven't, please. But I don't care. I'll talk about it anytime it's relevant because I love it. And it's my diner, goddammit. The Little Mermaid 2 is a tale with roots in queerness and the other.
I'm Hans Christian Andersen.
First, you have the background of the story, that it was written by a queer man about his unrequited love for a heterosexual man after that said man got married, clearly in the story making the object of his infatuation the prince and himself the other into the mermaid who, other than in the Disney version, doesn't get the boy in the end. And this portrayal of the titular Little Mermaid as an other could be another place in which Hikaru sees himself. A being from another world entirely who sacrifices greatly to be with the man she fell in love with for the chance to play at being human for a little while, even if it will ultimately lead to her death. And even if this causes her to constantly be in a state of horrific pain, which is not entirely unlike Hikaru breaking away a part of his insides to give to Yoshiki, making him weaker and more human. He gives up his power to the boy he loves, like the Little Mermaid gives up her voice and her tail. While the last text, Tsuru no Onogaishi, or The Grateful Crane, shares more common themes with The Little Mermaid in the way that it deals with a human man romantically involved with another, it differs enough to warrant its own bit of discussion here. Since this is likely the least well-known of the three, at least to a Western audience, a brief rundown of Tsuru no Onogaishi is as follows. It tells the story of a farmer who comes across a wounded crane who has been shot down from the sky by hunters. The farmer removes the arrow from the crane's wing and she flies away. When the farmer makes his way back to his house, he finds a woman he's never seen before waiting for him who tells him that she's his wife and presents him with a sack of rice that never runs out. After some time, the wife asks the farmer to create a room for her to weave cloth in, saying she'll make the cloth for him to sell at the market under the condition that he never looks into the room while she is weaving. And this is fine for a while, but he becomes curious about how his wife could possibly be weaving such beautiful cloth when he knows they don't have any thread. So he does the one thing he isn't supposed to do and looks into the room while she's weaving. And what he sees is a crane plucking out her feathers to use as thread to make the cloth. The bird notices the farmer and tells him that she was the crane he'd rescued and that she'd wanted to repay him for his kindness, so she'd become his wife. But now he'd broken his promise and seen her in her true form, so she has to leave. And she does. She flies away and the farmer never sees her again. The end. So while this myth does tread similar ground to The Little Mermaid in that it involves a non-human entity bending itself into a human shape out of love for a human man, there's a difference in this tale in the implication of there being a wrongness in the farmer glimpsing the crane's true nature. And while with the crane wife we don't know explicitly why this is wrong, in the case of Hikaru, his true self is something that is dangerous to witness. In fact, the first time we get a glimpse behind the human exterior, Hikaru is terrified he will have to kill Yoshiki for witnessing his true form. It's only after he swears not to tell anyone that Hikaru is able to relent on this, and later, when Hikaru offers to show him his true self, it is above all an act of intimacy. Because the Hikaru we see, the exterior that is a long-dead teenage boy, is not truly who this Hikaru is. We only truly get glimpses of him, and in the most recent volume, when Yoshiki confidently embraces the miasma that is Hikaru's true self, and in turn lets it consume him, it is Yoshiki accepting both his love for Hikaru, as well as finally coming to accept himself and his own sexuality. In juxtaposition to these stories, Disney version aside, The Summer Hikaru Dies has the strange other, be it monster, mermaid, or crane, being accepted by the human man with whom they have placed their affection. Which is part of why, while Hikaru's queerness has its own nuance, it ties into how Yoshiki views his own. If he can see Hikaru in his completely unhuman, unspooled form, and proudly proclaim not only that he doesn't find anything strange or unnatural in it, but that he loves him even when he's not conforming to a human norm, then this also plays into Yoshiki accepting himself. If there is nothing wrong with what he loves, then how could he, himself, be seen as monstrous? Which pretty much concludes what I had to say, so with that, why don't we head back into the diner and enjoy our treat? Look how pretty it is. Are you someone who can eat a cupcake as is, or are you weird like me and need utensils? Doesn't matter, it gets the job done. So what's your favorite monster love story? Do you think you'll tackle these cupcakes? Drop your thoughts on the work, the food, and what your favorite romantic horror story is in the comments below. I read all of your comments, even the really mean ones. Recipe, recommendations, and sources are listed in the description below. And hey, if you enjoyed your stay here, maybe you'd think about liking and subscribing to see what we cook up next. And if you want to go even further, we've got a Patreon! A lot goes on in front of and behind the camera to make these videos, and every little bit helps us keep the lights on in the diner and the gas on in the stove. Patrons get fun perks like getting episodes early, access to the Horror Diner Discord, and possibly even exclusive cat pictures. And patrons of $5 or more get to be part of the Horror Diner Book Club, where patrons get to vote on a book for me to cover that you can read along with me, and then I make an exclusive video on that book just for you on Patreon. We've covered things like Bitterthorn by Kat Dunn, We Used to Live Here by Marcus Klewer, What Hunger by Catherine Dang, The Sound of the Dark by Daniel Church, and I'll Make a Spectacle of You by Beatrice Winifred Eicher. It's neat! Patrons of all levels also get to enjoy exclusive content, like me having a mental breakdown after watching Return to Silent Hill. You can find that linked in the description as well as links to where you can find us at on Instagram, Bluesky, TikTok, and now on Tumblr. Happy Pride, everyone! This has been the Summer Hikaru Died. I've been Spooky Pie, and you have been amazing. Y'all come back now, you hear? Salem wants you to, too. Except he's leaving. Goodbye, Salem. Look who's here. The night manager. Clocking in for his shift.
Yay, we have a bear! Hi, you hang out with me?
Before I get comments on, why don't you talk? As I knock my microphone, maybe I'll just take that whole thing over. I love having seasonal allergies. I say like I don't have allergies every season. That sounds like yard work. Go away, I'm working. No way in hell that isn't picking up on the microphone. I just have a Noah tail just right here.
Noah.
Oh, look at him, he's so cute. Quiet so hard, talk smart. Don't write things at like 4 in the morning, kids. The triumphant return of the night manager. Yeah, you want to be a video lesson? Yes. I know this channel will probably do better than mine does. You can't have it. This. Salem.